In today's video, I'm going to talk about something that I can see with my own eyes, and so I imagine that a lot of people can see this with their own eyes. I do have blue eyes. I don't know if that comes into this at all. I don't know if people with darker pigmented eyes are going to have a harder time seeing this or can't see this. So just let me know in the comments. And this has to do with the ether. And people used to know that that was a thing. That was just an accepted scientific thing. And it's one of those backwards ideas where in the past, people were actually smarter and they knew more about the nature of reality than most science today. And it's also kind of a good example of there's a lot of things out there that aren't really that deep, but nobody will talk about it. It's just nobody talks about it. And that's why people don't know about it or share their experiences together. And this should be something that people talk about. Hey, how come when I look up at the sky with my eyes, I see these little particles of light dancing around? And so, I mean, that's basically it. I just told you what it is. When I look up at the sky, now I don't see it every day. I just checked earlier today and I could see it. When I look directly at the sky, I can see little tiny particles of light that they dance around on like a grid. And so first I'll describe the experience and then I'll show you what I mean. I just doctored up some images on MS Paint. Of course, a camera is not going to capture this. Maybe you could build a camera to detect this. I have no idea. But what I see with my eyes are little pinpoints of light. Sometimes they have like a chrome, I don't know, like a rainbow-ish hue to them, but it's very fine pinpricks of light, almost like you can't focus on them, or you have to let your eyes just kind of glaze over in order to focus on them. You see them mostly in a concentrated area, but it seems like it's a network of points of light that extends forever in the sky, but it's kind of hard to focus on it directly. And you see these little pinpricks of light, and they kind of zoom a little bit and then stop, and then zoom and then stop. And it looks like they're moving on like a grid-like pattern. I don't know. And it's kind of a hard thing to focus on. So it's hard for me to see if the grid pattern is hexagonal, like a honeycomb or something. But that's my idea. That's what it kind of seems like. Like maybe there's an underlying hexagonal grid structure. And they're just zooming along this grid structure, and they seem to do it in unison. They'll zoom off to a new node on a new vertex on the grid. They'll zoom off from one vertex to another and then slow down for a second and then zoom off again. And I think that's the ether. I think that we can see the electricity that's in the air. The air has electricity in it naturally. And yeah, I do believe in the ether, and people that were studying it in times past weren't just making stuff up, and they weren't stupid. They probably were studying a real phenomenon. And so yeah, I tried to take a picture and doctor it on MS Paint to kind of give you an idea, but it doesn't look exactly like this. But this kind of gives you they like zoom from one location to another, and then they slow down and stop zooming for a second, and then they'll zoom off again. That's what it looks like to me. I just painted this with MS Paint, so it's not a perfect representation. But I would see it like this in the sky. You're looking at the sky and you see these little tiny pinprints of light that are zooming around on a grid, it appears. And it's interesting that there's so much technology that has to do with airwaves. You know, radio technology comes to mind. And really, radio is like the beginning of the end when it comes to the propaganda machine. And so that's, I think, the connection here. I think that pop music really stands for Prince of Power, and these people are satanic minions, and the Prince of the Power of the Air is Satan. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, wherein in times past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. So I think there is power in the air. I think that's what power lines are. They're mostly collecting the energy. If you go on a road trip, you'll see tons of huge power lines out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I think I don't think that there's a bunch of power lines out in the middle of nowhere just for no reason. I think that they're collecting energy out there in the middle of nowhere, and they have them go for miles out into the middle of nowhere. And I guess they would tell you that that's because the power plants are put out in the middle of nowhere, and then so because they don't want them near people, I guess, but that doesn't make any sense. You would want to generate electricity like near places so that you don't have to worry about transporting it so far away. But it makes sense if the grid itself is what collects the energy. You would just send this grid out all over the place, and the grid itself is what's generating the bulk of the electricity. I do believe in other ways to generate electricity for sure, hydro and stuff like that, but I think that you're going to do that near where you're using it. And another thing that you'll notice on road trips and stuff, I can just notice this just driving from my town to another big town. When it starts to get industrial, you start seeing power lines like crazy. They'll double up, they'll triple up on power lines. It doesn't make sense to double or triple up on power lines if you're just transporting energy. Why would you do that? Why would you need two giant sets of power lines right next to each other, basically? And I think that they're doubling up on the collection of the electricity. And that's just my personal theories. John chapter 14 verse 30, hereafter I will not talk much with you, for the prince of this world cometh, and hath nothing in me. So I think that these prince references are talking about Satan. It makes you think twice about the character, the musical character, Prince. Kind of went for the androgynous look too. I think he was probably evoking this idea about the prince of this world being Satan. Nikola Tesla, I think, was trying to revive all of the... if you've watched videos on old world stuff, old world tech, it seems clear that they had all sorts of energy collection things on the roofs of their buildings, were highly ornamented with things that looked suspiciously like they're collecting energy out of the air. And a lot of people know that there's all sorts of high-rises, buildings out there that are collecting atmospheric electricity. Structures like the Eiffel Tower are probably harnessing atmospheric electricity. And yeah, Tesla probably was just reviving old tech. He probably didn't invent all this stuff. Rest in peace, Aaron Dover, if he is dead, if he didn't fake his death. I don't know. But yeah, the Twin Towers were mostly energy collection devices. The idea of having two of them, too. That kind of goes with... I know when I drive to California, I see lots of times, you'll see huge power lines, and they run in tandem. There'll be two sets of them running side by side up in the hill. They'll go off and up into the hills, and they just go for miles and miles. So maybe having them next to one another like that, you can get better use of it. I don't know. Interesting stuff about spiders using electricity. Thunder. What is thunder? And the whole distraction with Ben Franklin and the key thing. That's a whole distraction story. I think that the whole idea of the Ben Franklin flew a kite and had a key and charged a battery, that is such a weird Masonic distraction story. But the key to electricity is that it's in the air. I think it's just like a parable about, hey, there's energy for free and it's in the air, and electricity, or lightning. I think that's kind of what that story is. That lightning is proof. Lightning is everyday proof that there is free electricity in the air. And yeah, that's it for this video. Let me know if you have any idea what I'm talking about when I say that when I look at the sky, I can see little dots of light, pinpricks of light that kind of zoom around on a grid. I think that we can literally see the ether with our eyes, and that nobody knows about it because nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about hey, when you go outside and you look at the sky, do you see these little energy things that are flying around? A lot of people would think you're crazy, but I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. Um, am I totally nuts, or am I actually seeing something? I mean, I know that I'm seeing something, so I'm interested to see if other people can see this too. God bless everyone.